Here we have the backup to the edge of the creek setup. Now, if you've noticed, this is continuation from our last accumulation phase, our last study. And this is our sign of strength bar. I thought it would be good to follow through our study to completion. So as we know in Markovian terms, this resistance is known as the creek and support as the ice. And as we break resistance, more often than not, price, so this is a creek, as we break, more often than not, price will come back down to test the creek. And this is where we look to apply a long play. Hence the setup is aptly named back up to the edge of the creek, or BOEC. After a sign of strength like this, in an ideal world, or more often than not, we rally higher, and then we'll either A, come back to hold a higher level of support, which is still called the back up to the edge of the creek, or we come back to test here, like so. This is somewhat of an unusual back up to the edge of the creek setup, but that's okay. We can learn more from obscurity, of when things aren't so picture perfect. We can see from the sign of strength, we roll over for near 2 months. We don't get any continuation to the upside. However, we do see, we do push up, come down, we can see buying. And as we rally, we can see volume increasing. So we know there is some demand in the market. And don't get me wrong, we know that we have accumulation behind us, 100%. But for whatever reason, we don't know why, the professionals or the smart money are not ready for markup. They want to bring it back down for test. And then as we roll over here, we can see supply on this bar. Then as we rally from here, we see volume decline. So this is weak buying. And boom, what happens? At A, huge spread closing off the lows, and we close under our creek level, which should be support, because there's resistance before, and then as we break through, resistance turns into support. And what do we notice about bar A? Well, it's got ultra high volume, closes under support, yet off the lows, and this volume is actually higher than our sign of strength bar. Not that matters, but we do note that it is very high volume. If we draw in the tail, we can see that we have a wide spread. Well, I wouldn't call that ultra wide, but I would call that very high volume. So we know that there is buying in that bar, otherwise we should be making a wider spread down bar. Okay, so we know buying of sorts is present. We don't know how much as yet, but then what happens? 9 days we go sideways. There is no downside follow through from A. If bar A is supply, why aren't we going down? And that's the way we like to think. And then what happens at B? We dip under A, we dip under the previous bar to reverse and close firm back above this local level of support, which is why they're extremely important here on this volume with a pop in volume. So this is a spring. But what's important about this spring is look at the volume. So we test, we're under here and we're testing for supply, yet we reverse to close firm back above this level with much lower volume than A. Ergo, we now know that A is a shakeout. This bar A gets rid of all the weak longs. Perhaps from here and all over here, all these people buying and all these up bars. Where's the natural place that people, the retail will place their stops? Under support. It's natural. The smart money, there may be some huge stops here, which enticed the smart money to drive it down, as they did here, because that takes effort. Then they take the foot off the gas. There's weak demand because they're not participating, and then bang, they slam it down. They get momentum, triggers all these stops, and we can see that ultra high volume and the close off the low that is indeed buying. So this shakes out weak longs, all the people long from here, and may also induce a bear trap and go stop hunting. So that is a very good shakeout before higher prices, markup. Then from B, we rally, push through resistance with wide spreads, good volume, we come down, volume declines, narrow spreads, we break local support with a good wide spread, and we see buying all along. And at the highs, we get a lack of demand, and we come back down. Now, why do we come back down? We need to test. What are they testing? Well, this is very high volume. They need to make sure. That there's no more selling in the market before markup. This volume perhaps was a bit too high for them. There was a lot of selling in the market at that time. Okay. Then as we come back down, look at these two lovely little bars. What can we say about these two bars? If we combine the spread and the closes and this much volume, we would call this a mild case of bag holding, which we know to be strength. If we have all this volume, think here, we have all this volume here, and we're holding at support, where we have a shakeout in the background, a spring behind us, evidence of good buying, holding support, and of course we have a sign of strength bar and all the accumulation behind us. So this C is an extremely bullish setup. It's very high odds trade, and the market is very kind and gives 2 whole days for us to enter. Perhaps not on the first, but by the close on the second. And we can note the high volume if we combine and a lack of movement at support, and like I've just said, all this strength in the background is a give me trade. It's a much easier buy than B. Why? Well, from B, it is a spring. We do dip under to reverse a close firm, but we are trading under resistance. We're banging our head against resistance. Here, we're holding support. Holding support is much more bullish than banging our head against resistance for obvious reasons. Okay? Another way to think of this action here is when we're coming down and we hold here, and we can see shortening in the thrust in these closes here. Where is the supply we saw over at A? Where is the selling? We cannot come down. Look, we come down here. We come down here with good wide spreads. What's happening here? We're holding with high volume. Can only mean one thing: buying. And from here, the market rallies. I think at the time, this was March 2018, trading around 1400. Which is 1100 ticks, which is phenomenal. And this is from the back up to the edge of the creek setup, which is the safest trade out of this whole accumulation phase. I mean, don't get me wrong, if our skill set is high enough, we can trade the secondary tests. I love, this personal favourite is bag holding. I love bag holding, but again, it's very rare. I mean, this back up to the edge of the creek setup is not ideal, and it's far from picture perfect. You know, we have a shakeout, we have a spring, and we have a test with properties of bag holding. And we will probably never have a trade as difficult as this. This is a very complex study, but we can learn more from this chart than me providing you with a perfect back up to the edge of the creek or a standard back up to the edge of the creek setup, as we always want to push our boundaries and make ourselves uncomfortable in the way that we practice, in the way that we study, because that's where growth lies. Okay. Are there any questions for this chart? Where would your stops be? Good question. Well, if you're trading the spring, you have two options. You have under the last point of support, or a tight stop under the spring. This is how to think. This is how I think. We take the spring and we break through. Okay, and our stop is here. That's fine. Say we come back down and we get stopped out here, and then we rally back up, we take it again. And we'll take it again if it's tight. Why? Well, because we have accumulation behind us. We know it's accumulation. And therefore the core's built, the energy stored still has a long way north to go. So if we're very tight with our stops, we can get stopped out 1, 2, 3, 4 times. It doesn't matter. If you think in risk reward terms, say that is 50 ticks and we get stopped out 4 times, that's 200 ticks. We're still making, 1700 ticks? That's being stopped out 4 times. So the risk reward is worth the tight stops. However, to answer the question, spring here, stop under here or here, depending on your count size and your risk tolerance. And under here, you'd either put it under the bag holding or under the spring again, or under here. The choice is yours. I wouldn't use the last point of support. Why? Because we have accumulation behind us. So as this rallies, I put my stop to break even. I wouldn't do a trailing stop. It's too close, because I'm aware of this high volume bar, and the market does like to test high volume areas. So this action here is of no surprise. So if we do a trailing stop and we put it here under the last swing low, we're going to get stopped out. But that's okay. That's fine. When we read this, we re-enter. Good question. There are no further questions. On to the next.